consultant over at the Chancellor's office. Happy to bring this to you with my colleagues from the Technology Center, Amir and Omer. If you guys want to make a brief introduction, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. This is Amir Khan. I'm the Information Security Officer for the Tech Center.
Hello, everybody. I'm Omer Usmani, and I'm one of the security analysts at the Tech Center. I think I may have interacted with some of you as well.
Perfect. Thanks. So today, really what we wanted to do is we wanted to get together and talk a little bit about vulnerability management and just some of the key items that I've seen overall that help with setting up this kind of thing. And also I wanted to give the Technology Center a chance to demo a tool they have that's quite helpful on this topic and should be able to help you guys out. I wanted to get you guys an opportunity to see how it works, and be able to connect with them if you need to about anything related to that. So with that said, I'm going to start out with a question. This was something that came up the other day, so I found it amusing, so I will share with you as well. What would you say would be the most infamous vulnerability that has ever existed? And if you want to think about that for just a moment, I mean, there've been a lot that are out there and everything. Heartbleed. There was a lot of these other ones that came up, but somebody pointed out that actually probably one of the biggest ones, the most infamous that have ever showed up was actually this. I mean, was actually this, and this is my my little tip of the cap to Revenge of the Sixth Day today, Star Wars Day. I mean, you've got something where you got an intentional design flaw, you got an exploit stolen during a data breach. Management knew it was a problem and really didn't fix it. And hackers got in there, and then most of all, the worst thing is that they built another one and then put it in prod before they even hardened it. So I would venture to guess that this is one of the biggest, most infamous examples of a vulnerability that you might find out there. But in all seriousness, our agenda today, I want to start off and give you guys a little background info on vulnerabilities and kind of the world of vulnerabilities and exploits and those type of things, just so you can kind of understand what the bad guy side of things looks like on that front, just to frame the picture. And you've got it. I've got a few keys to vulnerability management that I want to go over, and then I want to toss things over to my colleagues at the Tech Center so that they can talk about tools they have to be able to identify and track vulnerabilities. One of the main reasons why I came up with this particular talk was we had an incident, a ransomware incident out at one of the colleges, and one of the ways in was through open RDP, or remote desktop protocol. And I thought that was interesting because that's something that might have jumped out on a vulnerability scanner. At least people might have known that it was there. At the time, it was not. There was something going on that ended up getting opened up. But the main reason I bring it up is that I thought about it. I said, this is an attack vector that the bad guys are using. How many other folks have this open? How many other folks potentially might be vulnerable to this? And I just looked at Shodan, which is a publicly available site that just does some basic scanning of the internet. All passively they do it, and they just create this database of publicly available information about different organizations. And I looked and I found 4 other colleges and districts that had the same issue, that had that open and everything. And of course, we reached out and we contacted them and let them know, and they were able to resolve it. In some cases, they didn't even know it was there. But I thought it illustrated a good point of how a good vulnerability management program can also help you know what's out there, can help you know what you are exposing to the world and exposing to the internet, and give you some techniques to be able to mitigate risk and shut those down. So I want to jump into the background info just a little bit here. I want to talk about, we always talk about 0 days, like, the types of vulnerabilities that you really don't know, that there's no patch for yet, that are out there. the world of 0 days is definitely an interesting part of vulnerabilities in the vulnerability research cycle. Obviously, your first way that something like this might come up is your software or hardware company discovers it itself, and they create a patch and release. So they'll release in the patch notes, hey, we found a vulnerability that might be this is how we're going to fix it, or something like that. They might not even say, they might just patch the code, that sort of type of thing. That's common. The other way that things come up is that you have security researchers or hackers that end up discovering it. And really the term depends a lot on professional security researchers are just folks who try and find bugs in programs pretty much all day. That's one of the big things that they do. Sometimes when an organization or something finds it, they might keep it for themselves and they might just use it. Like particularly, I've seen consulting groups or penetration testing groups or something like that do really high-end, like red team, tiger team kind of testing. They might keep a 0 day for themselves and do it. I've seen folks out there who are just looking for complete disclosure, and they'll just release it to the world without telling the company. Those folks can obviously cause a lot of trouble for everybody. There are folks who disclose it to the company, and then they spend some time disclose directly to the company. The company might respond and say that they're going to patch it and do that. I've had actually instances where there were ones that I found that reached out to a company and they decided that they really weren't going to fix it and they didn't think it was that big of a deal. And that sort of thing ended up, publishing it and releasing it at that point. More modernly, there are third parties like, the National Vulnerability Database and through, Carnegie Mellon and some of those other institutions that help disclose through third parties. So it gives an opportunity for these researchers to go there and say, hey, I found a vulnerability that does this. And then the third party will reach out to the company and say, hey, we've got somebody that's doing this. It protects the anonymity of the researcher who found it if they want it, protects them a little bit from some legal backlash. Sometimes those kind of things can try and happen. It doesn't happen as much anymore, but the old school way was, oh, you found something bad in my software, I'm going to sue you, which is just ridiculous when you really get right down to it. The other thing you might see is a lot of places have bug bounty programs, and the researchers, this is a lot of times how they get paid, is they'll just keep cranking away at different places like Facebook and Amazon and some of these other places that have bug bounty programs. And they'll, if they find something serious, they might get $20,000, or if they find something minor, they might get $5,000, that kind of thing. So they're constantly earning income through that. And then the big money, when we're talking about any sort of exploits, is really there's an entire kind of gray market of exploit brokers that are out there, and these are folks that work for nation state level folks. There's a few that we've talked to over the years, and what they're really doing is if they get an exploit, we're talking about something that's usually really good, like a Windows or Windows Exchange or something that's really, really serious, and they might broker it to like the CIA or something and say, hey, do you want this for that? That will do these kind of things. And this is kind of how like the CIA ends up getting some of their toolkits, or some of the more shadowy government agencies. This is how they kind of go through an exploit broker or something like that. There's obviously if it's sold through an exploit broker, the folks who buy it are the folks who really, really want to keep it secret and do those kind of things. So usually in that case, if those are discovered, they're actually discovered by incident responders in the wild discovering things. I mean, we've had, various different, hacks that have kind of gone like that. There was a shadow broker's toolkit that got released at some point because somebody discovered it, so on and so forth. These also obviously, these brokers and everything, they can run from folks who are just going to sell to, friendly governments, to somebody who might sell to any government or any person or any agency or any, bad guy that's out there. Just depends on the morals and the ethics of the person. So, I mean, as you can see, you can kind of go from this whole upper end of just, complete disclosure and complete transparency, and we want to fix it and we want to make the world a better place, to, I want to hide it, I want to keep it secret, and I want to sell it off, and then we're just discovering it after the fact. This is all stuff that happens kind of before we really enter the world of vulnerability management, because we don't really know what's out there. Protecting ourselves from 0 days is a very tough ask, and it's one of those things that I think falls in the realm of almost too big of an ask for a college or for that sort of organization. It can be very, very difficult just to get a good vulnerability management program running, having it up to date, having everything going, and that sort of thing. 0 days, you start having to get into some very, very advanced cybersecurity controls to be able to combat that. But the place that we can combat, and we can do a lot, and just the reason I bring that up is that if somebody has a 0 day, they're probably not going to burn it on you. I mean, just to be brutally honest, these are ones that, we're talking about high-end spy organizations are using it. They're doing those kind of things. They're looking for things. They're looking for big whales that they can get information on, and they keep these things secret. I mean, if you paid a couple $1 million for something and it's worthless the minute somebody patches it, you're going to keep it fairly secret too. So those are out there, but they're not the big concern. The big concern we have is sort of that 1+ day phase. And just so you guys understand kind of when that patch is released, I mean, we think about it, oh, patch Tuesday, okay, well, we got a patch, we got to do these kind of things. On the security researcher side, almost immediately what happens is as soon as the patch is released, these security researchers start reverse engineering everything, and they start trying to figure out what exactly was fixed. What are the changes in code? What did you do differently? What's out there? And they start nailing it down, and then they try and actually replicate. They try and make sure that it's a vulnerability, that it actually is something that can execute. Sometimes things will be out there that seem really serious, but nobody's able to actually replicate it. A lot of times, if they do, they might the researchers will publish a proof of concept, or at least evidence of a proof of concept, like, hey, I got this working. Usually, the more responsible researchers don't actually publish it out to the world because they don't want to make it really, really easy for the bad guys to jump in and just start using something bad that people can do. But eventually what happens is, hackers start to weaponize this and use it in the wild. So they're going to be using it for ransomware. They're going to be scanning the internet, trying to figure out what's going on. Obviously, there are researchers that work on the more black hat side of things, and they're obviously going to be using it to do their own nefarious deeds. And so when a patch or something is released that's really serious, you might find yourself in a race of, okay, well, we got to get things patched before, the bad guys never want to start using this. Of course, if this was something that was a 0 day, and is published out there, like for instance, there was a toolkit called Shadow Brokers a while ago that ended up getting released, and there was no patch for what was happening yet. So you had these tools out there and no patch. So it created this real race between being able to get the patch, for people being able to patch the systems, do these other things. So it can turn into a race when these very serious vulnerabilities are released and they're out there. And so that's kind of the world. That's what's happening on the other side of the fence as these patches and everything come out. And I wanted to tell you that just sort of so you have a little bit of context as we're going into actually vulnerability management and what our keys are there and what we're really looking at. The biggest one, and I can't stress this enough, is really knowing what you have. If you've got a good asset management system, that can help you understand, and particularly if you just understand where the critical systems are and what's going on. Vuln scans can help you support actually your asset management, being able to validate, being able to identify what you have, and understand some of that criticality. But that's something that if you can have some sort of asset management, really just know what you have and keep that aware, that can really help you. Obviously, having a regular patch cycle can be a big thing that can help you. I mean, I really recommend at least once a month, and that can be just to have a regular cycle that things are getting done. I have seen some organizations where it's, they just patch when they can, and they do these kind of things. You're really leaving yourself open to a lot if you're doing that kind of thing. The other part that's out there that people don't think a lot about is some sort of a testing plan. I know a lot of folks just sort of say, well, we wait to patch for 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something like that before we do a patch, just to make sure it doesn't break anything. We don't see any reports of anything coming out there. If you can have some sort of a cycle to get it out maybe a little bit quicker, that can be beneficial to you along the way. We've got, I've seen organizations do like an ABC kind of patch cycle where they say, our group A is our, maybe some of our IT folks, maybe a couple key users and some other groups that are more technically savvy and more open to being a part of, kind of testing, and they roll the patches out to them first and let them operate for a little while before they pull out, the sort of the second group, which is some of the less critical items and some other things like that. And then they do everything else kind of at the end, maybe having those cycles split with a week apart or, 5 days apart or something like that. I've seen cycles like that work really, really well. To be able to do something like that, as opposed to, trying to actually set up a full test environment and do those kind of things. If you have that, obviously that's great to do as well. The other thing that's important is really to define when exceptions need to occur in that patch cycle. So I'll have a little bit more on that in just a moment, but those are another things that kind of jump up like that. The most important scan, the most important thing is you're thinking about vulnerability management and your scanning and your patching and all those other things. One of the things you want to do is make sure that any remediation you do actually worked. So, your patches, make sure they actually applied, make sure they actually fixed the problem and did that. Folks sometimes look at scanning, oh, I just scan once a quarter. That's good. It's better than nothing. If you can scan once a month, kind of in line with those patch cycles, just to confirm that everything got fixed, everything is remediated, everything is looking better, that can be a really a big benefit for you, just to make sure things work, and make sure also when we look back to item number 1, knowing what you have, make sure that nothing else has popped up out there that you didn't know about. That can be really beneficial for you as well. The last thing I'm going to talk about before I toss it over to my colleagues here, I want to talk about a couple of exception kind of areas that I feel would jump out at me. The big one is sort of out-of-band patching. Like, when do you make the decision that this is so important, I'm not going to follow my schedule, I'm just going to get it patched now so we can protect. And I kind of put it into 2 categories. Kind of your yellow flag area. If you see things that are released with like a high CVE score, something of 9+ or something like that, or something that talks about any sort of remote command execution or RCE, those are definitely yellow flags. That's something that could turn into something very bad. I would monitor those and consider maybe patching early. Keep an eye on ones that come out that are that serious, so that you can know if you have to sort of jump up into an out-of-band scenario where you have to push the patch. Sometimes, and the reason I don't say doing it immediately is sometimes they aren't actually able to be replicated, and so you can still follow your normal patch cycle. It just is something that that they found that's extremely difficult to execute. It doesn't really work. No one can get a proof of concept. Sometimes you can be okay to stick to your normal patch cycle, but those are kind of the yellow flags to worry about. If you start hearing about something, and the big phrase that they usually use is actively being exploited in the wild. If you start hearing that, or if you start hearing that a proof of concept was released and confirmed, or that it's been weaponized, that sort of thing, those are things that really jump out to me. If you see those kind of things, particularly with a serious vulnerability, make sure that you're jumping into more of an out-of-band scenario and saying, okay, we got to patch our stuff tonight. We got to get it done. And those are the worst nights where you end up having to be up late and having to try and go through and do an emergency kind of patch cycle. But when you see that kind of red flag scenario, that's really where you want to look for those kind of key phrase and what the reports that are coming out about it, and those will tell you kind of what you need to do. And then the last and the other exception is really you have situations where you really can't patch. And in these kind of things, I think that the best thing you can do is, trying to segment it off, keep it away from the rest of the network if you can, as much as possible, so that if somebody, does compromise it, it doesn't become a good point for them to jump elsewhere into the network. You can also do really strong filtering rules, make sure it can only talk to just the servers it needs to talk to, or the systems it needs to talk to, and absolutely nothing else. So really narrowing down that, like basic IP filtering and port filtering, those sort of things can be really beneficial there. Sometimes application whitelisting can be really a powerful thing in these scenarios, because you get that up and running, and it makes it more difficult for people to use it as a pivot, and makes it more difficult for people to do those kind of things. It can help protect against those kind of scenarios. So those are just some of the basic kind of ideas, laid some background, and kind of gave you some general things to think about as it relates to the world of vulnerability management. And now I'd love to kick it over to the Tech Center, and they can talk a little bit about some of the tools they have to support your efforts along these lines.
Sorry, just a second. All right, so good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well today. Today, we're going to talk about Tenable SC. So this is a tool we offer to colleges for vulnerability management and scanning. So to start off with, I would like to answer a common question we have received on the difference between Tenable SC and Nessus. So Nessus is the vulnerability scanner you deploy on premise or in the cloud. And Tenable works as the web client that connects to a Nessus scanner. Tenable SC gives you an improved user interface and offers more analytical and customizable features than Nessus scanner alone does not have. So throughout this presentation, I might use the term Tenable SC and Security Center interchangeably since they do refer to the same product. So how does this work for colleges? We onboard colleges to our Tenable service by having them deploy a Nessus scanner on their campus network and connecting to our Tenable server with a few firewall rules. So on the server you installed Nessus 2, you just need to open inbound and outbound traffic on ports 443 and 8834 to our Tenable host. So the setup is actually pretty straightforward. Typically, Nessus requires the end user to purchase a license, and that could get pretty expensive. Last time I checked, it was about like $2,800 or $2,900. But in our case, once a Nessus scanner is linked to a Tenable SC instance, the license validates itself. So you could just use the individual Nessus scanner once setup is complete, but of course, you want colleges to take advantage of the additional features Security Center offers. So how can Tenable SC help with vulnerability management? So we could describe this as a 5-part process. The first is discovery. This is where assets across your network are identified and mapped. The second is assess. Here we understand the state of all assets, including associated vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, and some other health indicators. Next, we analyze the results. So here's where you do your patching and apply the appropriate remediation technique. Usually Security Center, oh sorry, I skipped ahead in my notes. So when you analyze the results, what you do is you identify how important an individual asset is to a business, and then you also look at the severity of the found vulnerabilities. So if it's something like a really old server that's critical and it's not important in day-to-day operations, then you can go ahead and segment it or just take it off altogether. So now after we analyze the results, here is where we do the patching and then apply remediation. So usually Security Center will link you the patch article released by the vendor of that discovered vulnerability. And then I will show that to you in this demo. Now, in some cases, such as vulnerabilities that, like I mentioned before, have really old CVEs associated with them, and they were published, let's say 15 years ago, you may have to do your own research on patching or just take it off the network if it's not critical to your daily business. So finally, the last step would be to measure your overall cyber exposure based on how many critical and high vulnerabilities you found. And then you could use that information to make better business and operational decisions. For example, organization with many assets that have critical vulnerabilities over the network may have issues with their operational process. And the reverse of this is also true. If your scans do not reveal a lot, then it's already likely that you have good practices in place. So before we proceed, I want to go over some terminology and concepts that I will refer to during the demo. So number one, we have scan zones, and this is actually defined on the administrator account within Security Center. So this contains the IP range, and what we do is we use this to assess your scan. So basically, it helps us put boundaries on what an organization is able to scan and what they're not. Also, if a college has multiple scanners deployed, the scan zone will tell Tenable SC which one to use. Next, we have repositories. Again, these are set up on the administrative end. This is basically a proprietary database within Security Center that contains vulnerability info over a range of defined IP addresses. So Tenable uses the scan data in the repository with this internal tool, such as dashboarding and report generating. Okay, number 3 on this list is organization. This would be your college or district. And within an organization, you can create different groups and users. So this way you can separate the types of assets different teams have access to scanning and viewing results for. Let's say, for example, you may have one team that specializes in Windows servers and another in databases, and you want to segment those out between different users. You have the ability to do that. All right, next up we have assets. So I've used this term up to this point previously, but as you probably understand, this basically means the type of host. So it could be a Windows server, IoT device, peripherals, etc. So, I mean, if a host is able to connect to your network, chances are that it will at least be detected and identified by the scanner. All right, so I'm going to start off with our demo. So we first see a section for dashboards. I will get into this later. First, we will go over setting up scans. So to do this, and to move through the different features Tenable SC has to offer, we use this navigation bar on the top. So we click on scans and then we select active scans. So this is where we configure things. So on the top right here, I'm going to click add. I'm going to name this scan. So next we have an option to select a scan policy, and this basically tells Tenable what information to look for in a scan, and thus your results will be shaped by the option you select here. So a policy is primarily driven by scan plugins, and what these are basically scripts published by Tenable that perform vulnerability tests. So Tenable cranks out lots and lots of plugin updates daily, and our security center server checks for updates every 15 to 30 minutes from Tenable's database. So if you want more information on plugins, one of the best places to go is plugins.tenable.com. So here you could search for specific published CVE, and you could check if Tenable has released a plugin for it. So usually if it's a 0-day, it's published within the same working day. So probably the morning after, you'll start noticing in your scans if you have such an asset, and if you scheduled your scans as such to run in the evening. So like Stefan mentioned previously, it is difficult to keep up with 0 days, and it is a lot to ask a team to patch right away. So it's also pretty difficult to write a scripted test for it. So that's something you have to keep in mind with the time it takes to get a 0-day publish. So to get an idea of what vulnerabilities exist for specific vendors, we can head over to Nessus families and look through here. So depending on the size of the vendor, some families of plugins will be larger and others will be smaller. And then you could just go here to get an idea of what's out there. Sorry about that. So back to Security Center, you could configure a custom scan policy from a separate menu, but for now, I'm going to select basic. So this is going to run a vulnerability scan. We also have discovery scan, and what this will do is simply perform a ping sweep of all the hosts you specify. If you have a large subnet, this option can be used to break the scan down and then help improve scan times when you decide to run the basic scan. Next, we have scheduling. So the best practice here is to scan daily during off hours, since in most cases, the scan should cause less of an impact over your network if you're doing it, off hours and in the evening and night. Also, if you have a large network, it could work well within your schedule to run the scans in the evening and night, and then have results to look at when you log back in the morning. Now for the demo here, I'm just gonna do now. Or actually, on demand. So after we apply the general configurations, we have setting to go through. So this is pretty straightforward as well. For this, so for the scan zone, I put up a few test environments since I can't actually show the tech center's scan zone. So I'm going to select DigitalOcean and then DigitalOcean repository. So in your case, this would be your college name. What else is there? So for scan timeout action, the best practice is actually to just import completed results and not the first option we create a rollover scan. So the reason for this is because we have had issues in the past where if a scan fails to initiate, it will roll over and try to scan again. And basically it will create hundreds of scans that would populate a large list in the previous menu I was in. And they're pretty difficult to remove because you have to go through them one by one. So I'm going to select import completed results. All right, so under advanced, I usually check the first two options to get more results. Scan virtual host will test web servers that host multiple websites running on the same IP, and track hosts which haven't issued new IP addresses will make things easier for you if you are running DHCP in your environment and you don't want duplicate results for the same device. So the last one I usually uncheck just in case there is a host that's taken off the network due to having a 0-day or critical vulnerability that needed to be patched as soon as possible. So unless I know the status of the host, if it's been patched or not, it's better to just keep it within the scan results. So usually when I check this, I leave, or when I uncheck it, I leave it at 365 because I know it's gonna appear again once it's back on the network. And then max scan durations, again, this part involves some experimentation. So if you are experiencing a lot of traffic on your network because of the scans, it might be a good idea to limit the number of time it runs. But for this demo, I'll just leave unlimited. Okay. So next we have targets. So there's basically two types. There's assets and IP or DNS name. Again, assets are basically the type of hosts. If you select assets, the scanner will scan over the defined networks in your scan zone for that specific type of assets. So let me see this here. A common one is like older versions of Windows Server, 2008, 2003, 2000. So most of the time, we scan using IP or DNS name option. So here we can define the scan using an individual list of IP addresses, IP ranges, or we can use a stutter block. And of course, we can use a DNS host name. So I'm just going to scan the DigitalOcean VPC I created for this demo. So it's going to be okay. So next we have scan credentials. Here we can add credentials for Windows, Linux, or database server. And this could be with an NTLM hash, certificate key pair, or just a user password as well. So this will basically give the scanner the same level of access a local user would. And this helps look for specific software installed on a box, and then it checks for vulnerabilities pertaining to those software. So I have one set up for Windows, but I don't have any Windows boxes scanned right now, so I'm just going to leave this empty. All right, so finally we have post scan. Here we could select a report if it's already defined. So I already created a report, so I will show you how to do that after we start the scan. So once you have a report created, you'll just see it appear here, and then you press this check icon. Now, if everything is good, we'll just let you proceed. All right, so I am going to run the scan. So to actually see the status of a scan, you have to go to the scan results tab here. So it's like it started. So as the scan is running, what Nessus does is it looks for certain variables, namely the ports open on a system, the type of operating system or kernel that it's running, and does that system that's currently being scanned have vulnerabilities? And then are there exploits available for these vulnerabilities? So while this goes on, I will talk through some other things that should be configured before you scan. So let's start with reports. To add a report, we just go back to the nav bar and we click on the reporting tab. From here, we go to reports. So from here, when you're starting off, you'll see add a report at the center here also, but since I already have one, I'm going to go to the top right and click add. So you'll notice that there are many templates to choose from based off of different standards and benchmarks. But to keep this thing simple, I'm going to select executive summary, and then I'm going to find the top 10 points. Now from here, I could further narrow down on certain options, but since I want to report on every single system on that VPC, I'm going to leave this as all systems. But you do have options to narrow things down here. Just going to do add. So once you do this, you should be able to add a report while configuring the scan. So like I did earlier. So to automate report generation, we click on the specific report we want. And then we hit edit. Now, since I have two of the same name, I'm gonna just change this one. So next one is definition. So this is just how the report is formatted. It's just best to keep this default. So and this is where we could set up things. So from here, if I have an email defined for an account, I can select that. No, I don't have that for my DigitalOcean admin account, so I'm just gonna put that here. Now, if I have multiple users, what I could do is I could also share the report with them. And then if your workflow has some publishing site where internally you're going to publish your findings, you could do that here as well. So I am missing something. Oh, here we go, scheduling. So basically, it's best to run reports weekly or daily. And it will base it off of different scans. So all your cumulative scan data will be reported in this. Submit. So another thing about scans are custom scan policies. And to configure those, we head over to scans and then policies. So on the top right, you do add, and then you'll see we have many options to select from, including ones based off of some of the more vulnerable exploits that were found over the last year. So I think we do have a zero logon, yeah, and we do have Solargate here as well. So do a custom one. You can head down here and do advanced scan. Custom scan policy name. So we have a lot of options here, but I want to focus down on narrowing down the plugins to scan for specific CVEs. So we just head over to plugins. Now, what I want to do here is disable shown. And then from there, I could find a specific vulnerability using one of these filters. So the easiest way to do this right now would be name. And let's say I want Microsoft Exchange, apply filter. But here we go. So it was able to search based on keywords. And what I could do is just enable the ones I need. So now that I've done this, I should just change name. Then I'm going to submit and go back to scans. All the things I just configured should be available now. So go to scan policy and see here. Now, since I don't have an Exchange server running in my environment, I can't actually scan for that, but I just wanted to show you for the purpose of the demo. And if I head over to post scan, okay, so since that was the same report and it's configured the same way, it's not showing up. But if you use a different one, that one would show up. Okay, so to see the results of the latest scan you ran once it completed, just go back to scan results. You click in and find them here. So I don't have anything critical running. So I do have a few highs. So I could also access this by going to analysis, vulnerabilities. And from here I can see. So on this menu here, I could filter out my results. So usually I leave this as vulnerability summary, but you might want to look through specific IP addresses. So you can do that as well. So notice this one, this is the one that has all the highs. Now from here, I can filter by severity. Okay, so I have to go to vulnerability summary first. And then it's looking for the vulnerabilities on the IP address I clicked on. So now I could click into a vulnerability to get more information on it. I could click again and I have even more information here. So basically I have to update my Ubuntu server because I have some outdated packages. And then as I mentioned before, it will actually give you the KB article that tells you how to patch. So that's pretty nice. And basically, once I patch, what I want to do is run a remediation scan. Now, basically here, it's just going to take that single host and scan against that, and then we'll see if the vulnerability appears again. And if it doesn't, it will just take it off the list of vulnerabilities. All right, so finally we have dashboards. So to add a dashboard, we just go over to the top right, options, and add dashboard. So here you'll see dashboards based off of different standards. So since I don't have many boxes on my network, I'm just going to select executive. And then usually the one people use by default is the executive 7-day. So I'll add that. So again, I want information on all systems, and I could schedule it. So perhaps every morning. So I could have fresh data to look at based off of scans I ran during the night. So this is a long list to go through to get to Pacific time, so I'm not going to do that. Oh, here we go. Okay. Let me go ahead and add. All right, so when usually when you first add a dashboard, it's all blank, and unfortunately, you do have to refresh the individual components. So let me do that. Okay, great. So we have things popping up. All right, so this could take some time, so let me move on. So since that scan finished, I should have been emailed a report, so I'm going to share that with you, and just so you can see how it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and download that. So this is what they typically look like. So usually if you had more posts, it would actually show the top 10. But since I only have, I think, 4 running right now, it's not going to show a lot. And some of the other ones don't have any highs or critical. So, but yeah, that's pretty much how they look like. It also gives you the remediation solutions here, so that's pretty nice. So I think I'm missing out. Oh, okay. So Blackout Windows. So here, basically, if I set a blackout window, what it's going to do is it's going to stop any scan from running during the time I specify. It's going to override any schedule scans I do. So if you want to, put a hard limit on scanning during, work hours, you could go ahead and do that here. So it's going to complete this. So that's pretty much all I have to show.
All right, thank you, Omer. So I'm going to ask Larry Suto, our pen testing expert, to speak about this a little bit, because he is exploiting vulnerabilities quite a bit, and he can give us his thoughts on what it entails and how to go about it. And
I mean, you want to just discuss a little bit of what we've seen?
Yes.
I mean, I think the most serious that we see usually is just there's a lot of older systems out there people just leave because they're hard to patch. Yeah, it's good to I think it's good to keep an eye on that stuff, and at least, or maybe segregate it away from your patched main high value main servers. So we do notice a lot of that type of stuff, and even places that do patching quite well often will just leave legacy systems up and running, not knowing that exploits are available for those legacy systems as well. Just because Microsoft doesn't give you a patch doesn't mean that somebody doesn't have an exploit for it. And since it's not being actively patched, it can pose a pretty significant risk. So that's just something I'd like to mention.
All right, thank you, Larry. If anybody has any questions, we have we can answer those right now. If not, then you guys always know how to reach us through the text on our website. You can reach me, Omer, or Larry. We can always talk to you about any issues that you're having regarding this, or any type of security needs that you may have, you would like to discuss. We're open for that all the time. So with that, I don't have anything else to add at this point. If there's no further questions, any final thoughts, Mr. Stefan?
No, other than, yeah, exactly what you said. I mean, all of us are happy to help in any way we can. So feel free to reach out if anything comes up, and to Amir or to myself or anyone else, and we're always happy to help you in any way we can. So appreciate you guys attending, and thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.